Title: A millionaire hired a humble cleaner to clean his mansion. One day, he came home early and was shocked when he saw what she had done to his 7-year-old son. The sprawling mansion sat atop a hill, its gleaming glass windows and towering gates exuding the wealth of its owner, Damien Harlow, a self-made millionaire. Damien had built an empire through relentless work and sharp business acumen. Despite his financial success, he found it difficult to balance his professional demands with fatherhood. His 7-year-old son, Ethan, was often left in the care of nannies, tutors, and housekeepers while Damien traveled the world, chasing his next big deal. A single father after the tragic loss of his wife in a car accident, Damien loved Ethan dearly, but his busy schedule left little time for bonding. To help maintain the massive estate, Damien hired a humble cleaner, a woman in her late 30s named Clara. She was quiet, efficient, and unobtrusive. Clara had no family of her own and was a widow. Her only joy came from her work and the small cottage she rented just outside of town. She was the type of person who blended into the background, easily overlooked and forgotten, which was exactly what Damien liked about her. She did her job without complaints, and that was all he needed. Clara's interactions with Ethan were minimal at first. She would smile kindly at him when she saw him playing in the garden or quietly reading in the library, but she never overstepped her boundaries. Ethan was a shy and introverted child. His mother's death left a noticeable void in his life. He had few friends and preferred the company of his books and toys over the rowdy world outside the mansion gates. Weeks passed, and Damien continued to leave the house early and come home late. One day, Clara noticed Ethan sitting on the stairs, holding a small toy airplane his mother had given him. His eyes were glassy, lost in a world far from the lavish mansion. Something stirred in Clara's heart, and for the first time, she approached the boy. "Would you like to help me clean the library?" she asked gently, hoping to pull him out of his melancholy. Ethan hesitated but then nodded. For the next few hours, the two worked together, dusting bookshelves and wiping down tables. As they worked, Clara told Ethan stories of her late husband, who had been a kind man who loved to read, much like Ethan. The boy listened, his eyes brightening as he found comfort in Clara's soft voice and shared memories. From that day on, Ethan and Clara formed a bond. It wasn't motherly, but there was a warmth between them, like two lost souls finding solace in each other's company. Clara would help Ethan with his schoolwork when the tutors weren't around, and she'd sit with him in the garden, telling him stories about the world beyond the mansion, tales of adventure and bravery that filled his young mind with wonder. Damien, meanwhile, remained oblivious to this growing connection. His life was a whirlwind of meetings, business deals, and late-night phone calls. He was aware that Clara was doing an excellent job keeping the mansion clean, and Ethan seemed happy enough, so he didn't question anything. One stormy afternoon, Damien had a business trip scheduled in Europe. He was supposed to leave that evening, but a last-minute change in plans delayed his flight. He decided to surprise Ethan by coming home early, something he rarely did. As his driver pulled up to the mansion's entrance, Damien was greeted by an eerie silence. The mansion, which was usually filled with the quiet hum of activity, felt strangely still. Damien stepped inside, setting his briefcase down on the marble floor. He called out for Ethan, expecting to find him in his room or the garden, but there was no answer. A sense of unease crept over him as he moved through the mansion, his footsteps echoing in the vast halls. He eventually made his way upstairs, where he noticed Ethan's bedroom door was ajar. The soft murmur of voices drifted out from inside the room. Curious, Damien pushed the door open gently, and what he saw froze him in his tracks. Clara was sitting on the floor, her back to the door, holding Ethan in her arms. The boy's head rested against her chest, and she was singing softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But that wasn't what shocked Damien. What sent a jolt of horror through him was the sight of Ethan's pale, lifeless face. His son wasn't moving. No! Damien cried out, rushing forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He fell to his knees beside them, his hands shaking as he touched Ethan's face. It was cold. Too cold. Clara looked up at Damien, her eyes wide with shock and sorrow. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Damien's mind raced. How could this have happened? Ethan had been fine that morning. He had been playing, laughing, completely healthy. Now he was gone, just like that. What happened? Damien demanded, his voice choked with grief and rage. Clara swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face. He collapsed. I tried to help him, but it was too late. He was gone before I could do anything. Damien's world shattered. He pulled Ethan's lifeless body into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. His son, his precious boy, was dead, and he had no idea how or why. In the days that followed, the mansion became a place of mourning. Damien was consumed by grief, blaming himself for not being there when Ethan needed him most. He couldn't understand how his healthy, vibrant child had suddenly died without warning. Doctors were called in, tests were run, but the results were inconclusive. There was no clear explanation for Ethan's death. Clara remained at the mansion, helping Damien through his darkest hours. She was there for him when he needed to cry, when he needed to vent his anger, when he needed someone to listen. She had become more than just a cleaner, she was a source of comfort in his time of unimaginable loss. But as the weeks went by, doubts began to creep into Damien's mind. Something about Clara's story didn't sit right with him. Why hadn't she called for help sooner? Why hadn't she tried to revive Ethan? And why had she been holding him so closely, almost possessively, when he had walked in on them? These questions gnawed at Damien, and soon, suspicion began to take root. He started to distance himself from Clara, watching her more closely, questioning her every move. He hired private investigators to dig into her past, desperate to find answers. What they uncovered only deepened the mystery. Clara had been married once, to a man named Michael. They had lived in a small town, far from the city. Michael had died under strange circumstances, a heart attack, the doctors had said. But there had been rumors, whispers among the townspeople that Clara had been involved somehow. There was no proof, nothing concrete, but the doubts were enough to make Damien's blood run cold. Had Clara done something to Ethan? Had she harmed his son in some twisted, unimaginable way? Damien couldn't shake the fear that he had let a monster into his home. Driven by suspicion and anger, Damien confronted Clara one evening. They stood in the grand hall of the mansion, the air thick with tension. "I know something's not right," Damien said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I know you're hiding something. Tell me the truth, Clara." What really happened to Ethan? Clara's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. I told you the truth, Damien. I would never hurt Ethan. I loved him like he was my own. That's the problem. Damien shouted, his fists clenched. You got too close. You started thinking of him as your child, not mine. I let you into my home, and now my son is dead. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. I would never. I didn't do anything, Damien. Please, you have to believe me. But Damien's heart was hardened. He had lost too much to believe her. In his grief and rage, he fired Clara, sending her away from the mansion without so much as a goodbye. In the years that followed, Damien lived in the shadow of his son's death. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, became a prison of memories. He never remarried, never found closure. The questions surrounding Ethan's death lingered, haunting him day and night. As for Clara, she disappeared, vanishing from the town without a trace. Some said she moved far away, while others whispered that she had taken her own life out of guilt. No one knew for sure. But Damien was left with the one thing he feared most, uncertainty. He would never know the truth about what happened to his son. Had it been a tragic accident? Or had Clara, the woman he had trusted, played a role in Ethan's death? The mystery remained unsolved, leaving Damien to live the rest of his life tormented by the unknown, forever wondering if he had made the right choice that fateful day.